to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and He walks with me and He talks with me. He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks in the sound of His voice, so sweet the birds hush their singing, and the melody that He gave to me within my heart is ringing, and He walks with me and He talks with me. He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'd stay in the garden with Him, though the night around me be falling, but He bids me go through the voice of war. His voice to me is calling, and He walks with me and He talks with me. He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known.
Thank you, Ron. Ron Bretsky is a musician here and somebody that Steve loved to hear perform. So thank you very much. Welcome. We join here today to celebrate the life of Steve Larson. We are here to celebrate this man. And our service today marks the passing from one plane to another, one that from the visible to the invisible. It is a challenging one for sure, one that many of us think is mysterious and just want to understand more. There's not any situation that is not good with God. And so even in the moment that we may not understand, we let ourselves approach this time of readjustment by turning to God, to turning to that God within. So life, being of God, is eternal. It never ceases to exist. It does not allow itself to be lost or ended by any more than God would allow that. God, our Creator, cannot be lost. And we celebrate. We celebrate life everlasting. We affirm our faith in God. We affirm our faith in God as creator and the oneness of all life. It is written in John 14, 1 through 5, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In your Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I have gone to prepare a place for you. And I go there myself, and where I am, you may be also. I am the way and the truth and the life." Steve is no longer here in our sight. Steve is everywhere. Reverend Karen Tudor always said that at a memorial. So it's fitting that I can remember that in this time, as she was one of Steve's long-term ministers. Steve is everywhere, certainly in our hearts. And so I invite Reverend Gary Kanye, Steve's last minister here, to pray with us.
Yes. So let's center in. If we're comfortable, to close those outer eyes. And as we take a deep breath, we know that right now, together, we are connecting with the one God, with the one light, and the one love that Steve so easily shown as he connected. And as I first arrived here, Steve opened his arms and his heart to me, and I am so touched by the love he gave me. And that always lives right here in my heart. And it's from this place that we open this celebration of this life, this one, as we take this moment to open ourselves to the bright light of God. We know that God gives us that renewal, that strength, that knowing that we are in the right place, at the right time, right now. And this is such a blessing. So let's let that be our guiding light as we celebrate this life of Steve. And let the love shine bright in our hearts, for we are blessed. Thank you, God, for this blessing, this beautiful day. Thank God for this beautiful spring. Thank God for your providence. As we set this prayer in our hearts for the indwelling Christ. And so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.
We know that this service is about bringing comfort, that from this time forward, we will think of Steve as unlimited by form. We will think of him as a living soul. And I will say that from the moment I heard that he had made his transition, I saw this Steve Larson free of the limits of body, dancing and skipping and moving with such ease. I just felt that he could just take a deep breath and say, at last, I'm able to move as I want. Steve Larson was born June 28, 1949, in Polk, Wisconsin. He was born to Neville and Sylvia Larson. Surviving are his son, Michael, who resides in Minneapolis, his daughter, Leslie, who is in Japan. And just a note, because he was so proud of her, she's a prima ballerina in Japan and works for a school there in her dance. He is also survived by sister by a sister in Ohio and his mother, Shirley, in California. And that is not right. He's survived by two sisters, one in Ohio, one in California, and his mother, Sylvia, in California. Sorry about that. He's also survived by his good friend, Mary. They've been close friends for 8 years and have traveled and had many good times together. Preceding Steve in death was brother Luther and father Neville. So when Steve came into this world, he had a lot of challenges. He was born with cerebral palsy, and when he was about 8 or 9, he developed polio. You know, in those times it was such a disease that was rampant and caused so many young people to have difficulty later in life. Steve was actually placed in a steel lung for much of his healing time, so an iron lung. So he had those challenges early on. It limited his movement and his breathing, and he succumbed to COPD. As a youth, in his youth, Steve and his family moved a lot. They were moving here and yonder, and when Steve turned 17, he struck out on his own to Nevada. There he became a Baptist minister. He worked with a home, a Christian home named God Is Me. There, this facility was for addiction recovery. And also the homeless. So he was very involved in that and helped out other people quite a bit. He worked with the Native Americans also. He enjoyed telling me stories about things that he did with them. At a later time in Virginia, Steve studied and became a transmission specialist. He understood how mechanical things worked, and he was good at repairing them. He could just kind of follow along to see where that problem was. And then he took about taking care of it. In recent years, he worked at S&S Garage in Marion, Texas, and then for Daryl's Tree Stump Company, where he repaired vehicles and machinery. And so these are the facts about Steve's life. These are the facts that we know, but there's so much more to Steve. And that was what was in his heart. That was what he shared as he would smile, that beautiful smile. When I had first arrived here, like you, Reverend Gary, he opened his arms, he blessed me, he thanked me, and he would always have something positive to say to me about my lesson or about what it reminded him of, what he thought about as a result of hearing the talk. Always brought up something. He also loved serving God. He loved serving God. That was very much in his heart. He served in many different ways. He served at Unity Village in the Nehemiah retreats, where people would go for a week or two, and they would do things to help the facilities there. They would paint, they would fix things. Now, Steve's favorite part of all of that was planting flowers. He loved the flowers. He loved that people could see those flowers and that he was beautifying the earth. For several years, he served in Family Promise. He would be here. He and Mary would be up here feeding and overnighting with the folks that were here, the families that had come to stay. He served and worked in and volunteered also for Safe Home or Safe House. He was just knowing God in so many ways, and let us see that and to see his love. He was an intelligent man. If you ever wanted to have a good, intelligent conversation, Steve was the one. He enjoyed reading, and he and Mary loved to travel. They liked to go to the small towns around, learn about the history of them, get to know some of the the beauty and the history and see the sights. He had a kind heart. He had a giving heart. These were demonstrated over and over again. But I believe that that one perfect example was the day that he made his transition. Mary was kind of between asleep and awake, and she saw this image. And it was the image of a large angel, a big angel, big in presence, big in size. And Steve was in front of the angel walking. And she and I both believe that this was Steve's way of letting Mary know that everything was okay. All was well. So I know that there are others of you who have stories of how Steve has touched your life. So I want to invite you up to share a few words. So if you would like to come up. Linda, will you hand me the mic?
Is this on? Okay. My name's Darren Robeck. I was Steve's last employer. She called me Daryl, but my name is Darren. I always get called Daryl, by the way. Anyways, Steve was a fantastic guy. The only thing that held Steve back was his physical issues, and I'm thankful that he's free of the burden of a broke down body that he fought with for a long time. He was an amazing man of faith. One of the reasons that I'm up here is because I wanted to let you all know how important his faith community here was to him. He loved this church, and he loved the people in it. He bragged about you quite often. I've heard about the youth group here and the things that they've done, and just talking about some of the kids in theater and the things that he's got to go do. And really, it's a great statement to hear coming from somebody, because there's so much division in the world, and to hear somebody who loved that they were going to a place where they felt at home. So my hat's off to you guys for loving on him and making him feel so welcome and at home. Steve was quite a joker, if you didn't know that. He liked to tease and stuff, and I always liked to give him all that I could. And anyways, he wore a brace on his boot, because of his ailments. And years ago, I heard a guy make a comment that said, I ain't saying the guy's crooked, but I have seen him screw his boot on a time or two. And one day Steve was out in the garage working on his boot because a screw had fallen out of it and stuff. And I'm saying, Steve, are you so crooked you got to screw your boots on? And he just, he couldn't hardly catch his breath because he was laughing so hard. But anyways, Steve was a great friend to me. He only worked for me for a short while. I knew his physical ailments wouldn't allow him to do a lot of work. But at the same time, I was in a spot to where I really needed somebody. And it was really nice to have somebody like Bruce at S&S Garage tell me that, Steve had integrity. He didn't have to worry about him. He didn't worry about tools disappearing, anything like that. So a trustworthy soul in this world is a rare find. And so for that, you can be proud. He served me well. I wish his body would allow him to do more. But I think I gained more spiritually from Steve than I ever did in the work environment. For every problem that I ever ran into, Steve had a daily word that he would bombard me with. And if y'all know, I hear all the laughter, he just really took his faith serious, and he was very encouraging to me. So you guys lost a very strong spiritual warrior in your congregation here, and he's going to be dearly missed by me and my family. So thank you all for opening up your hearts to him. Anybody else?
Many of us thought of Steve as a kindred spirit. And Steve decided along the way that maybe I wanted to be a pulpit minister when I grew up. So he put my name forward in Bernie, one of the churches he used to go to at Unity. And they called me and asked me if I wanted to speak. And I actually didn't have any desire to speak. But I ended up speaking a couple of years ago at Bernie and at Kerrville, and it was a nice experience. I'm glad I did it, challenged myself to do it. But Steve, I don't want to be a pulpit minister when I grow up.
As Sandra mentioned, Steve was a Family Promise volunteer, and he and Mary stayed. They were my Friday, Saturday people. They were always there. So I knew him from that and from Sundays. And when my husband died a number of years ago, Steve was talking to me, and he, said wonderful things, and we had a good conversation. And he said, "So how are things going?" And I said, "Well, I sold all of his hand tools, because we basically had a metal shop in our garage." And I said, "I sold all of his hand tools, but I have these other big things." And I knew Steve did something that was mechanical, but I didn't really know. And so I was just kind of complaining about, I got this and I got this. And I said, "I have an 800-pound metal lathe in my garage, and I don't actually know what I'm going to do with it. And it's attached to a mill drill that my husband used, and it's like, what do you do with that?" And he went, "I think I can help you." And I was like, "Yeah, sure you can, thank you." Because I thought, why would he be able to help me? And then the next time I saw him, he said, "You need to call this man." And he gave me this man's phone number. And he said, "You need to call him. He's ready to buy your metal lathe." And I thought, what? No, it's going to sit in the corner. And his name was John Martin. You know John Martin? And so over the course of about a month, John and I made a deal, and a trailer arrived, and John gave me a check, and they took away this 800-pound metal lathe and the mill drill. And I thought, oh my gosh, Steve just solved a huge problem for me. And he said, "Glad I could help." And that was it. And he and I had a lot of conversations during that process. But the idea that he knew someone who could solve a problem that I saw as unsolvable was such a help to me. And it was just the right moment. I'm glad I complained to him that day about having that sitting in my garage. But it was a huge thing to me. And I'm not sure I ever really told him how huge it was, but it was a great thing that he was able to help me on something that I didn't even know anyone could solve. So.
Well, I feel so much taller when I stand up here because I'm already tall. Steve, for me, was such an inspiration to my job here and what I do. He was a good encourager for me, for office stuff, for youth stuff, for everything that I did here. I can remember he would come to me with an idea, and half the time Divine Mind already shared the idea, and so we just collaborated and made it bigger. And so I'm so grateful for the very short time that I got to know him, because the size of the big space he has in my heart is way bigger than the time I got to spend with him. And for me in my career, this is probably my first, I call Ollie on my people, and he's my first people that I've lost temporarily. But I know I can tap in any time and spend time with him, just as I do my grandparents and so on. But he meant and does still mean a lot to me. So thank you.
I'm not going to do the stairs because I'm still recovering from an ankle thing, but Steve and I first connected when I first started volunteering for Family Promise before I helped try to coordinate it. And so he was really one of my first friends at the church, and when I introduced my name to him, he just stared at me, and he thought I was joking or something. He just was frozen, and he had a little tear in his eye, because my name is September, and it's not very common. And he apparently had a very close friend up north named September that had passed. And so we connected on that level immediately because he thought, I'm given another friend in September. How often does that happen? And then we both had Australian Shepherd dogs too, which are way smarter than their own good. And so we would talk about the silly antics of our dogs or that we've had in our lives, and especially Australian Shepherds. And then he became a friend not only with Family Promise, but also explaining to me the nuances of the way men think versus women think and some things when I was having problems with that. So he's a very precious friend that I hold dear. As you said, he's everywhere and always in my heart.
I love my engagement with Steve because often it was on Sunday, and once he came to see me, and I have to call attention to this detail. Steve loved to read, but I don't know anyone who read with all of his senses. He dove into books, and books that we had read in common, we loved to just talk about. And then he would, oh, I got this book. But it wasn't like he had just read it. He chewed every word, and then he let it kind of juice in him or something. And I just love because I can tap into that resonance when I read and juice it with Steve.
So I picked out this song, especially for this occasion. It's an old song of mine called Stick Pony. I guess y'all know what a stick pony is, huh? And I remember having one when I was a very little kid. I was too small, too young to go places on my own, but on that stick pony I did go a lot of places. And it kind of reminded me of Steve. I mean, what physical limitations he might have had with, his legs or whatever. His imagination, took him far beyond that. And so that's what Stick Pony is all about, going where you want to go. My, what a lucky guy. I got a stick pony, and now I'm going to ride. My, what a lucky guy. Got a stick pony, and now I'm going to ride. I'm gonna ride it to the park. I'm gonna stay out after dark. And when I feel I need to fly, I'm gonna take it up and ride. My, what a lucky guy. Got a stick pony, and now I'm going to ride.
Ron, that couldn't have been more perfect. Thank you. A few years ago, as I was doing my licensed Unity teacher prep work, I was doing it with a very dear friend. And she told me, long before anybody ever considered her making her transition, that I was to do her memorial service. And that there was one thing that she asked that I do. And it was something that she had created for her mother's service. And it's an adaptation of the 23rd Psalm. And with your permission, I would like to share that adaptation with you because it's personalized. So, because the Lord is Steve's shepherd, he shall not want. He is invited to lie down in green pastures. The Lord leads him beside still waters. He restores Steve's soul. He leads him in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though he walked through the valley of the shadow of death, he feared no evil. For you, O Lord, are with him. Your rod and your staff, they comfort him. You have prepared a table before Steve in the presence of his enemies. You anoint his head with oil. His cup runneth over. For surely goodness and mercy shall follow him all the days of his life, as Steve dwells in the house of the Lord forever. And that's the truth.
Thank you, Linda. What a beautiful thing it is to celebrate a life. What a beautiful thing it is to remember in this moment all the different ways that we've been touched. And I look right over here where Steve sat every Sunday, right over there, and kind of expect to see him there. He's there in my heart. So we know that when an individual goes through the experience that we call death, that it's simply a celebration and separation of the body, the clothes that we wear, from the soul. So this transformation, while we no longer experience Steve in the physical, sitting in that spot, he will always be there for me. And as this continues to unfold, as we live with this change in our lives, we'll be able to call him up, we'll remember the good times, and we'll smile. We will have the opportunity to reach out and touch someone as Steve would do that. And to remember that our faith can be as strong as his faith. For he was a man of great faith and great devotion. Mary Elizabeth Fry wrote this poem. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the softly fallen snow. I am the gentle showers of rain. I am the field of ripening grain. I am the morning hush. Oh, beautiful birds in circling flight. I am the starshine of the night. I am the flowers that bloom. I am in a quiet room. I am the birds that sing. I am in each loving thing. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I do not die. So I invite you to join me in prayer This is a loving kindness prayer. So I invite you to breathe in and bring Steve's face into your mind's eye. Every detail, imagine that loving light that shines in him, as him. That light that washes through him. That light that's within his heart. And allow it to expand in your mind's eye. That light expanding in his heart until it encompasses your heart. As you have that experience, allow these words to fall in to your heart. Take them and make them a part of yourself. May I be at peace. May my heart remain open. May I awaken to the light of my own true nature. May I be healed. And with those words, allow yourself to continue to hold Steve's face in the mind's eye. And I invite you to pray the prayer of your heart silently to yourself, or if you have a prayer from your religious tradition that you would like to say, please do so at this time. Allow yourself to send love and peace to Steve. Radiate love. Steve will never leave us. He lives on in our hearts and our memories. Let these sweet memories rise up and bring a smile to your face. And so it is. Amen. And we'll conclude in just a moment with music. I would like to invite you to stay afterwards so that you can share your journey and your memories that you wish to share. So we celebrate a life well lived. We celebrate a life free to fly. We celebrate Steve with many blessings. And now Ron with Amazing Grace.
Amazing